The news broke, sending shockwaves through every corner of the globe. It was like a thunderclap, echoing across continents and time zones, impossible to ignore. Headlines screamed in bold letters, "China backs $50 billion Nicaragua Canal." The world's attention was instantly captured. In financial hubs from New York to London to Hong Kong, traders paused mid-transaction, stunned by the sheer scale and audacity of the announcement. This wasn't just another infrastructure project. It was a geopolitical earthquake, shaking the foundations of global power. The move threatened to redraw the map of international trade, potentially shifting the balance of economic power for decades to come. In Washington, the announcement landed with a heavy thud, a direct challenge to American influence in the region and beyond. The White House's silence spoke volumes, as officials scrambled behind closed doors to formulate a response. But the story wasn't just for the powerful and the elite. In remote Nicaraguan villages, it sounded like a miracle, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. $50 billion, more than 4 times Nicaragua's annual economic output, offered hope for jobs, prosperity, and a new future for generations to come. For many, it was a spark of hope in a country long marked by hardship, poverty, and struggle. Yet, as the initial excitement faded, it quickly turned to anxiety and uncertainty. The audacity of the plan was staggering, a canal cutting through Lake Nicaragua, the nation's largest freshwater source. Environmentalists were horrified, indigenous communities were terrified, fearing for their land and way of life. The announcement brought hope to some, dread to others, dividing communities and families. The world watched, holding its breath, as the story unfolded in real time. Would this be a story of national rebirth, or the beginning of a disaster that would haunt Nicaragua for generations? The project's scale and ambition were unprecedented, dwarfing anything the country had ever seen. The risks, environmental, social, and political, were immense, and the stakes could not have been higher. Nicaragua stood at a crossroads, its future hanging in the balance, uncertain and full of possibility. The global order was being challenged in real time as leaders and citizens everywhere tried to make sense of what would come next. The first chapter of a high-stakes saga had begun, with the world as its audience. No one knew how it would end, but everyone knew history was being made. The Nicaragua Canal project was mind-boggling in scope, a vision that stretched the imagination and challenged the limits of engineering. It was more than just a waterway, it was a bold statement of ambition on a global stage. At 172 miles, it would dwarf the Panama Canal, accommodating the world's largest ships and promising to redefine international shipping routes. The sheer scale of the project was unprecedented in the region, but the canal was just the centerpiece, the heart of a much larger transformation. Plans included 2 state-of-the-art deep-water ports, a brand-new international airport designed to handle massive cargo and passenger flows, and a sprawling free trade zone meant to attract global business and investment. The goal: transform Nicaragua into a logistics powerhouse, a vital link in the chain of global commerce. Manufacturing, assembly, and global shipping would converge here, creating jobs and opportunities on a scale never before seen in the country. New roads, bridges, and even tourist resorts were part of the package, promising to modernize infrastructure and boost tourism. The government sold it as a ticket to the developed world, a chance to leapfrog decades of slow progress and finally realize Nicaragua's potential. The project would move more earth than almost any in history, rivaling the greatest feats of human construction. The technical and financial challenges were colossal, requiring expertise, investment, and coordination on a global scale. This wasn't a minor upgrade, it was a bid to reshape the nation's geography and its role in global trade, altering the destiny of an entire country. Supporters called it bold, critics called it reckless. The debate was fierce, with passions running high on both sides. The vision was holistic, but the risks were just as sweeping, touching the environment, the economy, and the very fabric of society. Nicaragua's future was being wagered on a single, audacious bet, a gamble that could either transform the nation or leave it burdened for generations. The world watched, wondering if the gamble would pay off, and what it would mean for the balance of global trade. The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome would echo far beyond Nicaragua's borders. For many Nicaraguans, the canal was a beacon of hope, a symbol of long-awaited change that could transform daily life for generations to come. 50,000 promised construction jobs, tens of thousands more permanent positions. This was a lifeline in a country where poverty was widespread and opportunities were scarce. For families struggling to get by, the canal represented a rare chance to build a better future. The government painted a picture of national rebirth, new schools, hospitals, and public services rising from the promise of development. Leaders spoke of a modern Nicaragua, where prosperity would reach even the most remote villages. Supporters saw economic liberation, a chance to harness Nicaragua's unique geography for its own people, not just for foreign interests. They dreamed of a country finally taking control of its destiny. But beneath the hope, fear grew, quietly spreading through communities as the reality of the project became clearer. The canal's route threatened to displace up to 120,000 people, farmers and indigenous communities with deep roots in the land, whose ancestors had lived there for centuries. Compensation offers were low. For many, land was identity, not just income. Losing it meant losing history, culture, and a sense of belonging that money could never replace. The greatest fear centered on Lake Nicaragua, the region's largest fresh water source, and a lifeline for countless families, farmers, and fishermen. Dredging a channel through it risked catastrophic environmental damage, saltwater contamination, oil spills, and ecosystem destruction. The delicate balance of life around the lake could be shattered forever. For some, the canal was progress. For others, it was an existential threat, a force that could erase entire ways of life. The project drew a line through the country, between hope and fear, prosperity and loss, unity and division. Communities were divided, their futures uncertain, as neighbors debated what was worth sacrificing for the promise of progress. The promise of prosperity clashed with the risk of irreversible harm, fueling passionate arguments on both sides. Nicaragua's most precious resource, its land and water, hung in the balance, threatened by forces beyond most people's control. The stakes were personal, immediate, and profound. Every decision would ripple through families, communities, and the nation itself. The nation was split, not just by a canal, but by the question of what kind of future it wanted, one built on new promises, or one rooted in tradition and the land. The world watched as Nicaragua wrestled with its fate, uncertain which path it would ultimately choose. At the center stood Wang Jing, a Chinese telecom billionaire with no experience in megaprojects. As head of HKND Group, he was granted a 50-year concession to build and operate the canal. Wang promised vast financing, but never named his backers. Major banks denied involvement. The money seemed to vanish into thin air. Was Wang a bold entrepreneur or a front for China's strategic ambitions? The project fit China's global infrastructure push, echoing the Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing denied involvement, but few believed it. The true source of power and risk remained hidden. Nicaragua's fate was tied to a man whose backers were shadows. The dragon's presence was felt everywhere, even if it could not be seen. The canal was never just about shipping, it was a bold move in the US-China contest for global influence. For 2 centuries, the US considered Latin America its backyard. The Panama Canal was its symbol. Now a Chinese-backed canal challenged that order. Was this commerce or a strategic gambit for Chinese military and economic reach? Analysts saw echoes of China's string of pearls strategy. The idea of Chinese naval access between oceans made US planners uneasy. China was no longer just a manufacturer, it was a global power, building influence in America's neighborhood. For Latin America, China offered investment without the baggage of US history. The canal became a symbol of shifting power. The US responded cautiously, wary of both bullying and strategic loss. Nicaragua's move was either savvy or reckless, depending on who you asked. The region's geopolitical landscape was being redrawn. The technical vision was breathtaking, a 172-mile waterway using Lake Nicaragua for a 65-mile stretch would dwarf the Panama Canal. The canal's width and depth would allow the world's largest ships to pass. 2 massive locks would lift vessels to the lake, requiring engineering on a scale rarely seen. The project demanded new ports, roads, power plants, and factories, almost a nation within a nation. Earthquakes, landslides, and environmental risks loomed large. Dredging the lake threatened to stir up centuries of sediment and pollution. The engineering was possible, but the risks were enormous. The canal would test the limits of modern construction and Nicaragua's resilience. Success or failure would echo far beyond its borders. The Nicaragua Canal proposal sent shockwaves through Panama. For a century, Panama's canal was unrivaled, a source of pride and prosperity. Now, a bigger, more modern competitor loomed. The new canal could reroute global shipping, saving days and cutting costs for the world's largest vessels. A price war between the two canals seemed inevitable. Panama's leaders expressed confidence, but privately, they worried. U.S. ports and global trade routes would be reshaped. The economic impacts would ripple far beyond Central America. The stakes, billions in revenue, thousands of jobs, and the balance of hemispheric trade. The competition promised to create new winners and new losers. As the government promoted the canal, resistance surged. Farmers and indigenous communities organized, fighting for their land and survival. Protests grew, met with harsh crackdowns and government dismissals. The opposition united environmentalists, lawyers, and civil society. They decried the lack of transparency, environmental risk, and loss of sovereignty. The canal became a symbol of authoritarian overreach and national division. Nicaragua's future was being contested in its streets and courtrooms. On Christmas Eve 2025, the canal route remains quiet. The grand project never materialized, the funding vanished, and HKND faded away. For opponents, it was a victory. They saved their land and lake. Their protest became a global case study in grassroots resistance. Yet for others, the canal's failure is a symbol of lost opportunity. The jobs and prosperity never came. Nicaragua remains mired in poverty. Supporters blame foreign interference for sabotaging the dream. The nation is still divided between those who see a crisis averted and those who mourn a future lost. The saga is a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition and the human cost of mega-projects. It's a story of hope, fear, and the enduring struggle over a nation's destiny. The canal was never built, but its legacy endures. Nicaragua's path forward remains uncertain, its greatest questions still unanswered.